one light? That works. Y'all can see that? Yeah. Okay. Basically because for somebody that is a part of this subculture to do what I'm doing right now is almost unheard of. So anyway, with that being said, because this subculture is so unique, the subculture that I'm a part of is so unique, I asked Mr. Bracey if I could do a presentation on it. He has been gracious enough to oblige, so I will just get to it. I am a registered sex offender. So this is a screenshot of me on the Texas Registry website. All of that information, anyone can go and look at it at any time. So yeah, when I was 19 years old, I had consensual sex with a 15-year-old girl. I knew her through church. And the original charge was sexual assault of a child. It was plea bargained down to attempted sexual assault of a child. And that's why that is what it says on the registry here. The sentence is a 10-year probation, which I'm currently in the last year of, and I will have to register until I am 43. Now, that is different than the common lifetime registration, which probably most of y'all are familiar with. That's what most people end up having to do. Also, another visual representation is that I have this little blue card that I have to keep on me and with me at all times. That is something that when I go to register, they hand that to me, and I just have to simply have that with me at all times. It's not something worth passing around. It's just a little bit of information, not a big deal. But anyway, to the lifetime registration, part of the reason for that is the media hysteria that surrounds any type of sexual offenses, sex crimes. Y'all have probably seen the news anytime that stuff pops up. They sensationalize stories. They especially sensationalize high-profile cases like the J.C. Duggar case. And they play on stereotypes. And one of the major stereotypes that they continually go on is the stranger danger stereotype. What they don't tell you is the actual statistics and actual numbers. One of those being, especially with the stranger danger stereotype, that 80 to 90%, or in this study, 94% or higher of offenses are committed by somebody the victim knows. Family member, classmate, teacher, or coach in the case of the Sandusky case. Also, 95% of offenders, of registrants, were first-time offenders. Or first-time offenders, which leaves less than 5% of reoffenses. Basically, the media would have you believe that the recidivism rate, or the reoffense rate of registered sex offenders is as high as 80%, and that they are the most likely of any type of crime or offender to reoffend. The actual statistics show that they are essentially the least likely to reoffend. And also, a third of the people that are on the registry were minors when they had to register themselves. And we're talking as young as 9 years old. And I know a guy who had to register at the age of 12, which is pretty crazy. So, despite these facts, the stigma that comes with this label is still, a big deal, still very much there. When most people think registered sex offender, they think child molester, they think monster, they think dirty old man. They think the #1 phrase, pedophile. It has been my experience that most people who use this word don't even know what it means, do not know the actual definition of the word pedophile. So with that, to share that with you, the actual scientific definition of pedophile is somebody who has a sexual orientation to, or layman's term, sexual attraction to, a prepubescent child. So that obviously does not cover any and all registered sex offenders. That is kind of a small, very small portion of registrants. But still, obviously that stigma remains. And as a result, you get stories like this young guy here, Christian Adamek, if I'm saying his name correctly, who streaked at his high school football game. As a result, he was no legal charges were ever officially taken, but he was threatened with legal action through the school, and with that, threatened with having to register as a sex offender. And because of the stigma that comes with this label, it was enough to scare this kid into committing suicide at the age of 15. Because just the idea of being labeled that was so profound. For myself, when I talk to people about my life as a registered sex offender, one of the most common, a common question is, how do you do it? How do you live life with this label that's placed on you as a part of this subculture? A big part of that is support. My family has been phenomenal throughout. I'm a newlywed, so my wife throughout our dating, and in fact, she was the first one that what made her wife worthy was she's when I outed myself to her, she was like, I not only will support you, I will fight for you, I'll fight with you. And she was essentially the first person that has ever responded that positively. But it is also a personal choice that I do not let this label define me. I don't let it control my life. That is what enables me to be in front of the classroom and out myself in this situation. Because obviously most sex offenders or registered sex offenders are not, they hide. They don't want people to know because the stigma that the label comes with. And also it enables me to be support to other registrants who have no support. So there's that. This subculture is probably one of the most misunderstood and dehumanized subcultures in history. And a term that I'm familiar with is that they are considered basically the lepers of modern society. Nobody wants anything to do with them. And that is just simply a perception that I'm working on changing, kind of one person at a time as I talk to people, or in this case, maybe who knows. So that is the subculture that I'm a part of. So.
Good job. I have a question, and please forgive me for how ignorant it is.
Yes.
Well, before you ask your question,
okay.
What do you say? Yeah, we talked, and you're prepared to answer questions.
Yes.
So, questions are welcome. I know it's a sensitive topic, so I will do a little policing if necessary, but you can ask all the questions that you want.
Yes.
Right. So you mentioned the whole stranger danger thing that is stressed. For the amount of offenders that are repeat offenders, or what we're stereotypically told are sexual offenders, do you think that maybe they've had a hand in steering it as, oh no, it's strangers that do this? If they're people that are close to the children.
That who's had a hand in that, I'm sorry?
The stranger danger aspect of it, of the way that stressed to children about watch out about strangers.
Yes.
Could a portion of that be the offenders who are repeat offenders and target children? Could it be them sort of a way to deflect so that there's not focus on them for what those specific people.
In other words, it's a way of making them not suspect.
Correct.
Because only strangers do that. You know me.
Yes.
That's what she thinks.
All right, good question. The grooming process of a victim is essentially a case-by-case thing. Using the word pedophile, it's especially when you're teaching young children, the whole stranger danger thing, they're in that pedophile age range. It's people don't. There are people on the registry who don't have, like I said, an attraction to them. I'm trying to think how to.
Well, because I definitely understand. I've had family members where, because of what was a consensual relationship, the parent of the female went press charges because of statutory. In those sorts of situations where it's the two people involved
Knew each other,
and it was consenting that the parents overtook it. I know in those situations it's not any sort of predatory action, but the times that it is, But I understand if maybe you don't have that information. I just thought I'd ask.
I mean, yeah, as far as, like I said, the majority of sexual offenses are committed by someone the victim knows. I mean, that just, a lot of times that's opportunity. It's where the person is in their life. I don't know. To use an example, someone had, bad breakup, alcohol, they're at a house where there's a kid, I don't know, playing doctor, and things kind of go that route. It's hard to really, I don't know, give an answer on that. Sorry.
It's okay.
So.
I appreciate that you're willing to be open about it.
Yes.
As well, so that's.
So I have a question. How does, when we're talking about subcultures generally, there's an interactive effect among the subcultures, right? So say, yeah, right this second? Okay. 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 Well, I'll ask.
That's okay. That's
You
okay. So I'm trying to better understand your question.
I'm trying to think of a better way to put it, use an analogy. Just a way of if the idea of stranger danger of to consider people that are close to the children,
Right.
like offenders that are close to their victims, but it's a predatory sort of sense.
Okay.
For the younger victims.
Okay.
Could the stressing of stranger danger be a tool that those offenders are using to go so they don't appear as suspects?
It's certainly possible. I mean, especially when there is, the cases of not just a one-time situation, but an ongoing situation. Sometimes the offender will, say stuff or use gifts or whatever to continue to, ruin the victim. So, and as far as, obviously once the parents find out, or anybody else for that matter at all finds out, and they report it, and that's when, the justice system comes in and, they go through that process, so.
I'm learning more and more about words and terms that I've never heard in this in the subculture groom. I've recently heard that, and it was in the pedophile way that they were explaining it. And what I got out of it, you were talking about gifts. Well, I didn't know it was gifts because I thought that just would be a sort of way of attracting.
Right.
But they were using it as a way of getting the younger exposed to sexual acts, meaning pornography, soft porn, or I'm guessing I'm thinking more of the end state, but that's really how I thought the word groom was used, not as gifts and attracting. And
Right.
then when we mentioned before in class, pedophile, we were talking about advertisement.
Right.
To kids. It was boy, girl, young, taking advantage of you being the superior, more into the smarter of the young one. I didn't see it so much as in that sexual way.
Right.
And then you mentioned earlier that even as young as 12, how is that? You mentioned the age difference when you have it registered.
Well, as far as juveniles on the registry, you have a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old playing doctor or experimenting as kids do with a sibling, with a friend. Parent finds out, teacher finds out, they don't know what to do with that, but they know it's wrong, so they report it. The way the system is set up, once the state has a hold of it, they go with it. And even because there is a sexual nature to it, to the situation, they will require them to register which is, I'm at 9 years old. And actually, again, one of the things media will tell you is that the juvenile offenders are at a high risk of becoming serial offenders. How do you know that when they're only 9?
Yeah, so that's when, like I was thinking of the movie I watch it often. That's My Boy with Adam Sandler, the Donnie Burger sword. Well, so I hear the difference. So in that case, 9 and 12. The 12-year-old would have to register, not the 9-year-old, but the 9-year-old would have become a serial offender. So, like in the Donnie Bird case, she got prison time, but wouldn't he? Or it's always the person, again, in the case, the older person. Then again, you say at 9 years old, they can say that.
Yeah.
Where does consent stop? Or the relationship stop? Maybe I'm wrong or I'm confused. I'm trying to get clarification on it.
Right. Well, obviously, the older person is usually going to be the considered the offender. In my case, 19 and 15, there's kind of recently been a subculture, the subculture known as Romeo and Juliet offenders, which includes basically no more than a 4-year age difference between the minor and the offender. So basically, you think high school senior with a freshman or sophomore happens all the time. How many would-be RSOs are out there, for this crime? Because in recent years that is finally getting some attention because it happens so much. They are, I think Texas has done it, and other states are hopefully following that will no longer be a registerable offense. They will have to do, jail time or whatever, but they will not have to register as a sex offender. I'm sorry? No. In that Romeo and Juliet scenario, as long as there is no more than 4 years difference between the two individuals. I am by my date of birth and the victim's date of birth, I am 3 months out of that window. So I have to register.
So the question I was going to ask is, and I don't know if you answered it while I was outside. When we're talking about subcultures, part of it is that the dominant culture creates the subculture for the dominant culture's own purpose. I would like to hear you talk a little bit more about what you think the creation of, you talked about how your subculture was created, largely through media, right? But not why, like what it does for, or why the dominant culture would feel the need to create this particular type of subculture. That's on the one. 2, what's the relationship among, like within a subculture, there's generally a relationship among the people who are identified, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, with that group. So prisoners, for instance, there's a culture that develops around that. Queer people, there's a culture that develops around that. Alcoholics, there's a culture that develops around that, right? It doesn't matter what the subculture is. There's an interactive element, and then there's a culture that develops out of that. What's the interactive element among RSOs and the culture that you would say has developed as a result?
The development, do you want me to go over the history of the registry itself? Or
No. Okay. So, say again?
No, I'm just saying you're asking just how they socialize.
Right. Like,
okay.
So for instance, like alcoholics, there's a group, Alcoholics Anonymous. There is a truth telling. They have the 12 steps.
There is in Texas a group called Texas Voices for Justice and Reason, basically that I am obviously a part of, that works on reforming the laws surrounding sexual offenses. I, in fact, lead the Austin group. I mentioned, being support for others. That's a big deal because, especially in prison, sex offenders, registrants are, even in prison, if someone finds out, they're the ones that they're gonna go after. We when we get together, a lot of times we'll share stories, share experiences in order to share information. Like when I go to register, where I register at, I can then go to these other individuals and say, when you go to this police department, this particular officer is actually rather nice. Whereas, I've heard stories where someone will go to renew their registration in another place, and their experience is, very bad. That the person is almost abusive towards them. And also just in daily life, relationships. RSOs don't want to out themselves to people in fear of them eventually finding out. So just being its own community, and we've worked on that. And my wife and I have tried to intermingle the people we know to be offenders with our friends that are not, and in hopes that I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, to develop a community, regardless of labels and pasts. So I hope that answers that. As far as the how this subculture came to be, obviously the registry, as we know it today, goes back as far as the 1930s. But obviously you have Megan's Law in '96 that established the registry becoming public. The registry was created in '94, became public in '96. Ever since then, the media hypes cases. They'll talk about it and sensationalize stories. And you have word of mouth. If you can go on YouTube and look up videos about where go on the or asking people on the streets, what do you think of when you hear sex offenders, and you'll hear words like castration, incurable. Like I said, the words monster, child monster, pedophile. That people sometimes don't even know what these words mean. They just lump them in one big group, and they don't. And even the justice system itself uses one very broad brush to encompass any and all sexual crimes. They do not do it by a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so I don't know if there's two more questions out there. I know Mattia has one, okay. and then I have to you have a quiz, so I have to get the lecture at some point.
Question I had was, all right, seeing as there's a case-by-case thing, so how do you deal with that? Like, actually, say if you're trying to get an interview or for a job, how's your in your situation, how does that turn out? Did they actually listen to what you had to say, or is it just because of that stigma they didn't really get
Well, my work experience as it is now is in restaurants, which is the restaurant industry as a whole is very liberal when it comes to criminal records, because you go to restaurants and a lot of the staff do drugs, drink a lot, party. So me
That's
coming
true in
in.
the academy.
Huh?
That's true in the academy. I didn't drink until I became a prof.
Yeah. So me coming in and explaining, my situation, which I have to a potential employer, my experience thus far has been positive. That being said, when I graduate within the year and move into a professional industry, that's a big question mark. Yeah. Now, I'm in the audio program. My offense does not have anything to do with the work in the industry that I want to be doing. That it might still be up to the discretion of that person who's going to choose to hire me.
Because they're definitely going to do a background check.
Yes.
It's definitely going to come up.
Yes.
And yeah.
There's a second part to the question?
No,
okay.
Second question.
I don't know if there's one more question or not.
You said you were working on changing laws concerning.
Yes.
Yes. What kind of?
Okay. So as a convicted felon, I cannot vote on the individuals who are in office. I can have a profound effect on the laws that they pass. In fact, anybody can. I mentioned earlier going to the committee hearings when a bill is being presented to the House or the Senate. anybody can go. They do public hearings and basically plead your case. A good example is this last session, place of employment bill, which was a bill that proposed to have the place of employment taken off of the public registry. Several of us as members of Texas Voices went, we spoke. There was one representative from the media who defended keeping the employment information on the registry, obviously the main defense being the public has a right to know. So that is really as far as we can take it. After that, it's in their hands whether they choose to send that bill on and have it be passed or not. And that bill was in fact passed, and the employment information was taken off of the public registry. So anytime you look at the registry, look up an individual, where they work is not will not be on there. The law enforcement still has that information when they bring up somebody in their computer, but it is not on the public registry. So does that explain that? Yeah.
Well, thank you for the
Yes.
presentation, man. I appreciate it. You know, one of the points that I want to make, that was really